joining us in your busy days, and we're sorry for being a little late. Governor Ventura just got off the View, but we're delighted to have him back. The second time within a year at the Society and the Russian Tea Room. It's always a delight to have him here. Firstly, I would like to thank Ken and Hassan Bibaraj, also Jen Hobbs, Skyhorse, and upcoming Hudson Union Society events include Brooke Shields, somebody that Governor Ventura is very fond of, Larry Flint coming up, Miranda Richardson, Sally Hawkins, Prodigy from Moe Deep, and many, many other individuals. But anyway, just to start it off with some Q&A before we open up to a couple of audience questions. Governor Ventura, could you tell us how you decided to run for governor of Minnesota?
How I decided? I have been mayor of Brooklyn Park, the sixth largest city in Minnesota. It's a first-rank suburb of North Minneapolis. And I was mayor from 90 to 94. And then, of course, I did something unheard of. I did one term and went back to the private sector. Imagine that novel concept, you know, serving and going back to what you used to do. Well, actually, I didn't go back to what I used to do. I then went into radio for a while, and I was doing talk radio. And 4 or 5 years had gone by, and believe it or not, this was in the 90s, if we can recollect back that far, when there were massive budget surpluses. Anybody remember that? At least Minnesota had a lot of them. And we had a surplus, I know, right before 98, and the government took the money and kept it. And I was outraged on the radio. I said, wait a minute, they set a budget. Just because the economy is so strong that their taxing brings in more than they need does not give them the right to be kids in a candy store. And now, well, we got more money. We got an extra $2 billion in tax revenue. Let's spend it. Well, I got on the radio and said, that's outrageous. That money should go back to the taxpayers. And so I made the mistake that I kept talking about it on radio, and I kind of boxed myself in a corner because I said, maybe I ought to run for governor. Well, the minute you say that, and of course, if you're doing talk radio, if you lose your credibility, you're dead. And so I boxed myself into a corner to where I literally had to run. And what was interesting, I was the only candidate who had to go 7 months with no income because when I filed, because of FCC regulations, I had to come off the air and I couldn't work. And yet my opponent was the Attorney General and the St. Paul Mayor. For those 7 months, they were getting paid with my tax dollars while they weren't performing the job they were elected to because they were off campaigning for another job. Isn't that sweet? I would like to see a law that if you decide to go for another job, you have to resign the one that you currently hold, because certainly you're not doing it. And it certainly shows when they tell you, I'm the only one for this job. No, because you can now run off and run for another job, and you're certainly not doing the job you were elected to do. But then again, I'm kind of archaic when it comes to my thoughts on what government ought to be. But anyway, that's how I ran for governor, and of course nobody gave me any chance to win. Let me add this before we go to the next question. My father was a World War II veteran, as was my mother. Not too many people can say they have a mom and dad who both served in World War II and who are both buried in a federal cemetery as veterans. And when I was growing up, my father said to me one day when I was a young teenager, and he only had an 8th grade education, but you know what? As time goes on, he gets smarter every day, and he's been gone since 91, but he gets smarter every day. And who's got a cell phone in here? I don't even own one, nor will I ever. Anyway, that's true. My father said to me, all politicians are crooks. And I said, come on, Dad, you can't make a blanket statement like that. They can't all be. He said, yes, they can. You know why? I said, why, Dad? He said, because they spend $1 million for a job that only pays $100 grand. Well, we wouldn't do that in the private sector, would we? Unless, of course, we were getting a government bailout. But you wouldn't do that in the private sector. You wouldn't spend more money than what you're going to earn. That makes no sense. So I cannot, if my dad were alive, he could be proud of his son today. Because when I ran for governor of Minnesota, I only raised and spent $300,000. And I made $120,000 a year, which if my high school math is correct, that means I made $480,000 and only spent $300 to get it. So Dad, your son's not a crook.
It's absolutely brilliant. Why do you think the Reform Party hasn't gained more momentum since your time?
Well, the Reform Party got destroyed. It was a hostile takeover. It was a party that was new, and they made rules that allowed for it. And so after Perot had gone the route, who do we end up with who came in with his millions of people? Pat Buchanan. That's when I quit. But he could do that because they didn't know what they were really doing, and you could come there and become a delegate by just showing up. So he brought in masses of people, and you know why he did it? You notice he never really ran? He did it because he had incurred millions of dollars of debt from the time he ran previously, and because of Perot, he was entitled to get something like $20 million. He took that and simply retired his former debt with it, and never ever really ran that year. You notice that year he didn't really show up and run. Well, that's what he did. It was like a hostile takeover of the party. I left the party. Today, I will tell you this. I do not advocate for the third party anymore. And I'm probably their highest elected official. Now, that may shock you, but here's what I now stand for today. I stand for the abolishment of all political parties in our country. I believe we should take the Democratic and all these political parties, make them political action committees like they are, and make the candidate and the candidates committee run on their own. And the simplest way we can start and do that is by only putting names on a ballot. No party designation. Just John Smith, Joe Jones, whatever the names may be. That way, amazingly, you as the voters will have to educate yourselves. What does John Smith stand for? And I know that's asking a lot of American citizens to actually educate themselves before they vote. I'm being sarcastic, John. Thank you. And the reason being is because today it is too convenient. If you're conservative, all you do is look to see who the Republican are. You don't even know their name. You look to see who the party. Republican, 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 Republican. If you're liberal, Democrat, 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 Democrat. Let's remove those and only put names on a ballot. That's a great start. Just put names on a ballot.
And how did you decide to join the Navy SEALs?
Well, first you have to join the Navy.